The stars had always been quiet. Admiral Taiho Quan stood on the bridge of the Eternal Soul and watched them through the massive viewing window. 12 star systems belonged to humanity now. 12 places where humans lived, worked, raised families, and dreamed of peaceful futures. It had taken 300 years to reach this point. 300 years of blood, sacrifice, and hope. Taiho was 62 years old. His hair had turned gray at the temples, and deep lines marked his face. He had fought in the First Contact War 20 years ago, when humanity first met the Valoran Dominion. That war had lasted only 8 months, but it had killed 11 million people. Since then, there had been peace. Cold, uncomfortable peace. The Valorans looked down on humans like insects. They traded with humanity because it was profitable, not because they respected them, Admiral said. Lieutenant Unishin from her station. She was the youngest officer on the bridge, only 24 years old. Her voice was calm, but Taiho could hear the worry underneath. We have received a formal request from the Valoran Dominion. Taiho turned away from the stars. What do they want? Passage through human space. They claim they are chasing rebel elements who fled into our territory. Captain Jehobik stepped forward. He was Taiho's second Ginkandam, a man with a quick temper and absolute loyalty. Rebels? The Valorans have never mentioned rebels before. They're mentioning them now, Eunice said. She pulled up the transmission on the main screen. The Valoran ambassador appeared. He was tall and pale, with silver eyes that held no warmth. His voice was flat and mechanical. We require passage through your systems along the approved route. This is not a request. It is a necessity. You will comply, or there will be consequences. Taiho felt his jaw tighten. The Valorans always spoke like this, always with threats hiding behind polite words. He looked at Jiho. What systems are along the approved route? Jiho checked his console. 7 systems, Admiral, including Myra 7. Taiho's heart went cold. Myra 7, his sister, lived there. Dr. Hannah Yoon had moved to that colony 5 years ago with her husband and 2 children. She worked as a xenobiologist, studying alien plant life. It was supposed to be safe. It was supposed to be far from any danger. How many people live on Myra 7? Taiho asked. 2.3 million, Yuna answered. Mostly families, farmers, scientists. It is one of our most peaceful colonies. Taiho closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of his nephew Do Yen, who was 12 years old and loved building model ships. He thought of his niece Somi, who was only 7 and called him Uncle Star because he lived among the stars. Contact Earth Command, Taiho said. Tell them we need to discuss this request carefully. The discussion lasted 3 days. Politicians argued. Generals debated. In the end, they agreed to allow the Valoran fleet passage through human space. But there were strict conditions. The Valorans would stay on their approved route. They would not stop at any human colony. They would not engage with any human ships. If they broke these rules, it would be considered an act of war. The Valoran Dominion agreed to everything. 2 weeks later, our fleet entered human space. 47 warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They moved through the first system without incident, then the second, then the third. On Myra 7, Dr. Hannah Yoon stood in her laboratory and watched the sky. She was 45 years old, with kind eyes and steady hands. Her husband had died 2 years ago in an accident, leaving her to raise Do-yan and Somi alone. She had thought about moving back to Earth many times, but her children loved this colony. They had friends here. They had a life here, Mom Do-yan said from the doorway. He was tall for his age, with his father's serious face. The news says the Valoran ships are changing direction. Hana turned to her console and pulled up the tracking data. Her blood went cold. The Valoran fleet was no longer on the approved route. They were heading directly for Mira-7. She contacted the colonial governor immediately. He told her not to worry. He said it was probably a navigation error. He said the Valorans would correct their course soon. They did not correct their course. Within 6 hours, 47 Valoran warships surrounded Myra 7. They blocked all communication with the outside world. They disabled the colony's small defense grid. They positioned themselves above every major city. Hannah gathered her children and took them to the underground. It had been built during the First Contact War, when people still feared invasion. No one had used it in 20 years. "Stay here," she told Doyen. "Do not come out until I come back for you." "What is happening?" Somi asked. Her small face was pale with fear. Hannah knelt down and hugged her daughter. "Everything will be okay, I promise. Just stay with your brother." She gave Doyen a small data chip. "Keep this safe. It contains everything I have recorded about the Valoran ships. If something happens to me, give it to your uncle." "Nothing will happen to you," Doyen said, but his voice shook. Hannah kissed both her children and sealed the bunker door. Then she ran to the communication center. The colonial governor was there, along with dozens of other officials. Everyone was shouting. Everyone was afraid. "We need to send a message to Earth," Hannah said. "We need to tell them what is happening." "The Valorans are blocking all signals," someone replied. Hannah thought fast. She remembered something from her research. There was an old communication relay hidden in the mountains, built before the colony was established. It used a different frequency. The Valorans might not know about it. She ran. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life. The relay station was 3 kilometers away. Her lungs burned. Her legs ached. But she did not stop. The relay station was covered in dust and vines. She cleared the console with shaking hands and activated it. The power flickered. The screen lit up. She had one chance. One message. She typed the address for her brother's ship, the Eternal Soul. Then she spoke into the microphone. Her voice steady despite her terror. "Taiho, this is Hannah. The Valoran fleet has surrounded Myra 7. They have blocked all communications. They have disabled our defenses. They are not here for rebels. They are here for us. Please help us." She sent the message. The screen showed transmission successful. Then she heard the sound. A low hum that grew louder and louder. She looked through the window and saw the sky turn orange. Valoran ships were descending toward the cities. Bright lights flickered beneath them. Not lights, she realized. Weapons. On the Eternal Soul, Admiral Taiho Kwan received his sister's message. He listened to her voice. He heard her fear. "All ships," he said quietly. "Set course for Myra 7. Maximum speed." Jiho looked at him. "Admiral, we are 3 days away, even at maximum speed." Taiho did not answer. He just stared at the stars. The quiet stars? The stars that suddenly felt very far away. His sister's voice echoed in his mind. "They are here for us." He did not know yet what those words truly meant. He did not know that in 6 hours his entire world would change. He did not know that humanity's darkest hour was about to begin, but somewhere deep inside he felt it. A cold weight settling in his chest. The silence before the storm. The first bomb fell at 0600 hours. It did not explode with fire. It exploded with silence. A strange green mist spread across the capital city of Myra 7, and within minutes, people began to fall. They fell in the streets. They fell in their homes. They fell in schools where children had just arrived from morning classes. The Valoran biological weapon was designed to kill quickly. It attacked the lungs first, then the heart, then the brain. There was no pain, the scientists would later say, as if that made it better. As if that made the death of 2 million people acceptable. Hannah Yoon watched from the mountain relay station. She could see the city below. She could see the green mist spreading like a living thing. She could hear the screams through her radio, and then slowly the screams stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any sound she had ever heard. She thought of her children in the bunker. The bunker was sealed. The air filtration system was old, but still working. They would be safe. They had to be safe. She tried to send another message, but this time the relay would not work. The Valorans had found the frequency. They had blocked everything around her. The world was dying in orbit. The Valoran fleet broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. The High Commander appeared on every screen, his silver eyes cold and empty. The human colony designated Myra 7 harbored genetic insurgents who threatened Valoran security. We have exercised our right to eliminate this threat. Any species that offers shelter to enemies of the Dominion will face the same consequences. It was a lie. Everyone knew it was a lie. But the Valorans did not care about truth. They cared about power. They cared about fear. On Earth, General Suji Park stood in the command center and watched the death of Myra 7 in real time. She was 58 years old, with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much war. She had never lost a battle in her entire career. But this was not a battle. This was slaughter. How many? She asked quietly. 2.1 million confirmed dead, her aide responded. The biological agent is still spreading. We estimate total casualties will reach 2.3 million within the hour. 2.3 million. That was every single person on Myra 7. Every man. Every woman. Every child. Suji's hands did not shake. Her voice did not break. She had learned long ago to bury her emotions deep where they could not interfere with her duty. But inside, something cold and hard began to form. Something that felt like ice in her chest. "What is the status of Admiral Kwan's fleet?" she asked. "Dude, 3 days out." "They will not arrive in time." Suji nodded slowly. "Contact all member nations. Emergency session. 1 hour. The United Nations of Earth gathered in the Great Hall. Representatives from every country on Earth and every human colony sat in stunned silence. They watched the footage from Myra 7. They saw families running through streets filled with green mist. They saw parents trying to shield their children with their own bodies. They saw old people and young people, rich and poor, all dying together. And then they saw something else. The Valorans had begun landing ground troops. Not to help. Not to secure the area. But to collect the bodies? They were harvesting genetic material from the dead. Samples for their experiments. Resources for their research. They were treating human beings like cattle. General Suji Park walked to the podium. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to her. 2.3 million, she said. Her voice was calm and steady. That is how many people lived on Myra 7. This morning, families, children, scientists, farmers, people, who wanted nothing more than to live their lives in peace. She paused. The Valoran Dominion has claimed this was a security action. They have claimed our people were harboring terrorists. This is a lie. There were no terrorists on Myra 7. There were only innocent people who happened to live on a planet the Valorans wanted. She touched a button, and a geological survey appeared on the screen behind her. Beneath Myra 7 lies the largest deposit of Helionine ever discovered. This mineral can power starships for centuries. It can make the Valorans the dominant power in the galaxy. That is why they killed our people. Not for security, for greed. The room erupted in angry voices. Suji raised her hand, and the noise stopped. The Valoran Dominion believes humanity is weak. They believe we will protest, complain, file diplomatic objections, and eventually accept what has happened. They believe we are too afraid to fight back. Her eyes swept across the room. They are wrong. She stepped closer to the microphone. They crossed the red line. They killed our children. They butchered our families. They harvested our dead like animals. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. But everyone heard every word. What follows will be unforgiving. On the eternal soul, Admiral Taiho Kwan received word of his sister's death. She had been captured by Valoran ground troops while trying to reach other survivors. They had executed her publicly, broadcasting her death across the planet as a warning to anyone who might resist. Taiho watched the footage once. He watched his sister kneel in the dirt. He watched her look directly into the camera. He watched her lips move, forming 2 words: protect them, his children. She was talking about her children. The footage showed the weapon rising. Then it cut to black. Taiho sat alone in his quarters for a long time. He did not cry. He did not scream. He simply sat there, staring at the wall, feeling something inside him change. The man who had believed in diplomacy, who had hoped for peace, who had thought that civilized species could resolve their differences without war, that man died in that moment. What remained was something harder, something colder, something that would not rest until justice was done. Captain Jahobik knocked on his door. Admiral Jaho said softly, "We have received word from Earth Command. General Park has declared a state of total war. All civilian ships are being converted to military vessels. All factories are switching to weapons production. Every able-bodied citizen is being called to service." Daiho looked up. "And what are my orders?" "You are to assume command of Operation Reckoning, the largest military mobilization in human history." Jiho paused. "The general says to take whatever time you need." Taiho stood slowly. He walked to his window and looked out at the stars. "Time," he said quietly. "I do not need time. I need the Valorans to understand what they have done." "What have they done, Admiral?" Taiho turned to face his old friend. His eyes were empty and cold, like a frozen lake. "They woke us up." In the bunker beneath the ruins of Myra 7, 12-year-old Do Yan held his sister Somi in his arms. The air filtration system hummed softly. The walls were thick enough to block the biological weapon. They were alive, but they were alone. Dojan had tried the communication system dozens of times. Nothing worked. He had enough food and water for maybe 2 weeks. After that, he did not know what would happen. Somi had stopped talking yesterday. She just sat in the corner, hugging her knees, staring at nothing. She was only 7 years old. She did not understand why their mother had not come back. She did not understand why the ground shook and the lights flickered. She did not understand any of it. Duhian held the data chip his mother had given him. He did not know what was on it. He only knew that she had died to protect it. "I will get us out of here," he whispered to his sister. "I promise. I will find Uncle Taiho, and he will make them pay for what they did."
Oh.
Above them, the Valoran ships continued their work. They did not know about the bunker. They did not know about the children hiding beneath the dead planet. They did not know that their greatest mistake was not killing everyone. Their greatest mistake was leaving survivors. 3 months passed. The galaxy watched humanity and waited for what would come next. They expected protests. They expected demands for justice through diplomatic channels. They expected the humans to beg the Galactic Council for help. None of that happened. Instead, something strange occurred. Human space went dark. No trade ships left human systems. No diplomatic messages were sent. No tourists visited alien worlds. It was as if an entire civilization had simply closed its doors and turned off the lights. The Valoran Dominion celebrated. Their high commander gave speeches about human weakness. Their news networks showed images of Myra 7 as proof that resistance against the Dominion was pointless. They believed they had broken humanity's spirit forever. They could not have been more wrong. Inside human space, something extraordinary was happening. Every factory on every world had switched to military production. Shipyards that once built cargo vessels now built warships. Research laboratories that studied medicine now developed weapons. Schools taught combat tactics alongside mathematics. Churches held prayer services that ended with shooting practice. Commander. Wu Jinan stood in the briefing room of his secret base and watched the transformation on dozens of screens. He was 49 years old, a small man with a forgettable face and eyes that missed nothing. He led the Ghost Division, humanity's most secret military unit. They did not officially exist. Their missions were never recorded. Their methods were never questioned. "How many ships do we have now?" he asked his aide. 4,000 combat-ready vessels. Another 6,000 will be complete within 2 months. Wuji nodded. Before Myra 7, humanity had 800 military ships. Now they would have 10,000. And that was only the beginning. On Earth, engineer Nari Choi presented her work to the Defense Council. She was 35 years old, brilliant and haunted. She had spent her entire career studying weapons that humanity had deemed too cruel for civilized warfare. Weapons that had been locked away and forgotten. Weapons that violated every rule of engagement ever written. This is the extinction protocol, she said, displaying schematics on the screen. Biological agents that target specific genetic markers. Gravitational weapons that can collapse a planet's core. Nanoswarms that can reduce a city to dust in minutes. General Suji Park studied the display. These weapons were banned decades ago. Yes, General Mia. Because we believed warfare should have limits? Nari's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. The Valorans have shown us what happens when only one side respects limits. The room was silent for a long moment. Build them, Suji said finally. Build all of them. Nari closed her eyes briefly. She had hoped somewhere deep inside that they would say no. That someone would stop her from creating instruments of absolute destruction. But no one did. Because everyone in that room had lost someone on Myra 7. Everyone had watched the footage. Everyone had seen what the Valorans were capable of. Yes, General, Nari whispered. I will build them all. Meanwhile, Commander Wujan received a special mission. Intelligence had detected life signs beneath the ruins of Myra 7. The Valorans had missed something. Someone was still alive. Wujin took his best team. 5 elite soldiers who could move like shadows and kill without sound. They slipped through Valoran patrols, landed on the dead planet, and searched the ruins. The bunker was exactly where the intelligence said it would be. Wujin cut through the sealed door himself. What he found inside broke his heart. 40-7 children. They had survived by sharing food, rationing water, and keeping each other warm in the darkness. The oldest was 16. The youngest was 4. They looked at the soldiers with hollow eyes that had seen too much. Who are you? Asked a boy who stepped forward protectively. He was 12 years old, thin and dirty, but his jaw was set with determination. I am Commander Wujin on Ghost Division. We are here to take you home. Wujin knelt down to meet the boy's eyes. What is your name, son? Doyon Quan. My uncle is Admiral Taiho Quan. Wujin felt something click in his mind. The Admiral's nephew. The sister's son, Doyon Wujin, said gently. Your uncle sent us. He has been searching for you since the first day. Doyon's tough expression cracked for just a moment. His lower lip trembled. But he did not cry. He had forgotten how to cry. I have something, Doyon said. He pulled out the data chip. My mother gave it to me. She said it was important. Wujin took the chip carefully. We will make sure it gets to the right people. Now come, all of you. It is time to leave this place. The children were evacuated in absolute secrecy. The Valorans never knew they had been there. They never knew that witnesses to their crime had survived. They never knew that those witnesses would grow up carrying memories that burned like fire. Admiral Taiho received Doyon on his flagship. He held his nephew for a long time without speaking. Doyon was stiff at first, but slowly his arms came up and wrapped around his uncle. Where is Somi? Taiho asked finally. She did not make it, Doyon whispered. She got sick. The medicine ran out. I tried everything, uncle. I tried so hard. Taiho closed his eyes. His niece, 7 years old, gone. It was not your fault, Taiho said. You kept yourself alive. You kept the evidence safe. Your mother would be proud of you. Later, Taiho watched the contents of the data chip. His sister had recorded everything. The Valoran ships changing course. The communications being blocked. The first bombs falling. And then, the most important part. Intercepted Valoran transmissions that proved the entire attack was planned months in advance. The rebels were a lie. The genetic insurgents were a lie. It was always about the Helionine deposits. Taiho sent the evidence to General Tsuji. She sent it to every intelligence agency in human space. The truth spread like wildfire. And with the truth came rage. Pure, burning, unstoppable rage. In his quarters that night, Taiho watched a hologram of his sister. It was an old recording from 3 years ago. When she had visited him on the Eternal Soul, she was laughing at something he had said, her eyes bright with joy. I'm coming, Taiho said to the hologram. I am coming for all of them, and I will not stop until they understand what they took from us. The hologram continued to laugh. Frozen in a moment of happiness that would never come again, General Suji called a final briefing before the war began. Every admiral, every general, every commander gathered in the Great Hall. She stood before them, small but powerful, her presence filling the room. In 3 days, we launch Operation Reckoning. We will not ask for surrender. We will not negotiate terms. We will not show mercy. She paused. Some of you may think this is wrong. Some of you may believe we should be better than them, that we should hold ourselves to higher standards. She looked around the room. You are right. We should be better. But our children are dead. Our families are gone. Our people were harvested like grain. Her voice hardened. So we will not be better. We will be effective. We will be thorough. We will be the nightmare that wakes them screaming for the next 1,000 years. She stepped back. Admiral Kwan, the fleet is yours. Taiho stood. He looked at the men and women who would follow him into war. He saw fear in some eyes, determination in others, grief in all of them. They called us weak, Taiho said. They called us inferior. They thought they could kill our children and face no consequences. He paused. They were wrong, dead wrong. He raised his hand toward the stars visible through the window. Let us show them what happens when you wake the sleeping giant. The fleet launched 3 days later, 4,000 ships moving as one, the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. They did not broadcast their intentions. They did not warn their enemies. They simply came, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The first Valoran border station vanished at midnight. One moment it was there, a massive structure floating in space housing 3,000 soldiers and support staff. The next moment, there was only dust. The Valorans did not even have time to send a distress signal. They simply ceased to exist. Commander Wujinan watched from the shadows as his Ghost Division completed their work. They had used gravitational charges. Same technology the Valorans had once claimed was too dangerous for any civilized species to possess. Now humanity had it. Now humanity used it. Target eliminated, Wujin reported to Admiral Taiho, moving to secondary objectives. Within 24 hours, 12 more border stations vanished. Communication hubs went silent. Supply depots exploded. Valoran commanders woke up to find their networks destroyed, their supply lines cut, and their forces isolated. The Valoran High Commander demanded answers. His generals had none. They could not understand how humanity had struck so many targets simultaneously. They could not understand how the humans had slipped past their defenses undetected. They could not understand any of it. Find them, the High Commander ordered. Find them and destroy them. His generals tried. They failed. Admiral Taiho led the main fleet into Valoran space 1 week after the first attacks. He did not sneak. He did not hide. He brought 4,000 warships in a formation that stretched across the stars like a wave of fire. The Valorans sent their fleet to meet him. 60,000 ships, their full military might. They outnumbered humanity 15-1. They were confident. They were powerful. They were unprepared. The first thing Taiho did was release the nanoswarms. Engineer Nari Choi had designed them to be invisible to sensors. They drifted through space like dust, harmless and unnoticed, until they reached the Valoran ships. Then they began to eat. They ate through hull plating. They ate through power systems. They ate through weapons arrays. Within hours, the Valoran fleet was crippled. Ships drifted helplessly, their crews watching in horror as their vessels fell apart around them. Admiral Captain Jiho Beek said from his station, "The Valoran commander is requesting communication. He wishes to discuss surrender terms." Taiho stared at the screen showing the dying enemy fleet. He thought of his sister kneeling in the dirt. He thought of his niece who died in a dark bunker. He thought of 2.3 million people who had done nothing wrong except live on a planet that the Valorans wanted. "Surrender terms," Taiho repeated quietly. "They want to discuss surrender terms." "Yes, Admiral. What should I tell them?" Taiho was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke one word. "No." The human fleet opened fire. They did not stop firing until there was nothing left. News of the battle spread across the galaxy. Species that had watched the destruction of Myra 7 in silence now watched humanity's response with a different kind of silence. They saw the Valoran fleet destroyed. They saw the humans offer no mercy. They saw what happened when you pushed humanity too far. No one condemned the humans. No one called for peace talks. No one offered to help the Valorans. The galaxy simply watched and learned a lesson they would never forget. The war continued. Captain Jihobeek led ground assaults against Valoran military installations. He was brutal and efficient. His soldiers moved through enemy bases like ghosts, killing everyone they found. A reporter who had somehow attached himself to Jiho's unit asked about civilian casualties. Jiho turned to face the man. His eyes were empty and cold. "They did not count ours," he said. "Why should we count theirs?" The reporter had no answer. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Yunishin worked tirelessly to broadcast the truth to every corner of the galaxy. She sent Dr. Hannah Yoon's recordings to every news network, every government, every species that would listen. She showed them the evidence that Myra 7 was murdered for profit. She showed them the intercepted Valoran communications that proved the entire attack was planned. The Valoran Dominion lied. Yuna's voice echoed across 1,000 worlds. They committed genocide for resources. They harvested human bodies for genetic material. They treated an entire civilization like animals to be slaughtered. She paused, letting her words sink in. And now humanity responds. We do not ask for your help. We do not need your approval. We only want you to remember. Remember what the Valorans did? Remember what we did in return? And remember that humanity will never, ever forget. The Valoran homeworld was called Valora Prime. It was a beautiful planet, covered in silver towers and crystal gardens. 20 billion Valorans lived there in comfort and luxury, believing they were safe behind their military's protection. Admiral Taiho brought his fleet to Valora Prime 6 months after the war began. The Valoran military had been destroyed. Their colonies had surrendered. Their allies had abandoned them. There was nothing left to protect their homeworld. The Valoran High Commander contacted Taiho directly. His silver eyes were no longer cold and confident. They were filled with fear. "Admiral Kwan," he said, "we wish to negotiate. We can offer reparations, resources, territory, whatever you want. Just please spare our people." Taiho looked at the High Commander for a long time. He thought about what he wanted. He thought about revenge. He thought about justice. He thought about his sister's last words. Protect them. "You asked me to spare your people," Taiho said slowly. "Did you spare ours? We made a mistake. We see that now. We are willing to pay any price. Any price." Taiho leaned forward. "Can you bring back my sister? Can you bring back my niece? Can you bring back 2.3 million innocent people who died because you wanted their planet?" The High Commander had no answer. "I will not destroy your world," Taiho said finally. "That would make me like you. But I will take something more valuable than your cities." His voice hardened. "We'll take your future. Your military will be dismantled. Your government will be dissolved. Your empire will be broken into pieces so small that you will never threaten anyone again. And every year, on the anniversary of Myra 7, your people will gather and remember what they did. They will teach their children, and their children's children. They will remember forever." The Valoran High Commander was captured and brought before a tribunal. He was found guilty of crimes against humanity and executed publicly, just as Dr. Hannah Yoon had been executed. His generals met the same fate. Every leader who had approved the attack on Myra 7 was hunted down and brought to justice. General Suji Park addressed the galaxy one final time. "We gave you civilization," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of known space. "We gave you trade. We gave you peace. And you gave us Myra 7. She paused. "Remember this. Remember what happens when you cross humanity's red line. Remember what follows." She stepped back from the podium. "Ow. It is unforgiving." The war was over, but humanity was not finished. They spent the next year dismantling every piece of the Valoran Dominion. Their fleets were scrapped. Their factories were destroyed. Their colonies were given independence. The great Valoran Empire that had once ruled a quarter of the galaxy was reduced to a handful of scattered worlds, powerless and broken. Admiral Taiho stood on the bridge of the Eternal Soul and watched the last Valoran warship surrender. Jiho stood beside him, silent and thoughtful. "Is it enough?" Jiho asked finally. "Does this balance what they took?" Taiho considered the question for a long time. "Oh," he said, "nothing will ever be enough. Nothing will bring back the dead. Nothing will heal the wounds." He paused. "But it is done. And they will never forget what happens when they threaten humanity." Jiho nodded slowly. "What now?" Taiho turned away from the window. His face was tired, older than his years. He had become something he never wanted to be. A destroyer. An instrument of vengeance. A man who had crossed lines he once thought unthinkable. "Now we go home," Taiho said, "and we try to remember how to be human again." The fleet turned toward Earth, leaving behind the ruins of an empire that had once believed itself invincible. The stars were quiet once more, but it was a different kind of quiet now. The quiet. After the storm, 1 year had passed since the death of Myra 7. 1 year since the galaxy watched humanity transform from peaceful traders into unstoppable warriors. 1 year since the Valoran Dominion ceased to exist, Admiral Tiho Kwan stood on the ruins of the Valoran Senate building, the very place where the order to attack Myra 7 had been given. The once magnificent structure was now empty. Its crystal spires cracked and broken, silver halls filled with dust and silence. In the center of the ruins, human workers had built something new. A memorial made of black stone, shaped like a flame frozen in time. On its surface were carved 2.3 million names. Every person who had died on Myra 7, every family destroyed. Every child who never had a chance to grow up. Taiho found his sister's name near the top. Dr. Hannah Yoon, beloved sister. Devoted mother. Hero below her name was another. Somi Kwan, 7 years old. Loved stars and flowers. Taiho touched his niece's name with trembling fingers. He had not cried during the entire war. He had buried his grief beneath duty and vengeance. But standing here, touching the cold stone, that was all that remained of a little girl who used to call him Uncle Star. He finally broke. Tears fell down his weathered face. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. For a long moment, the great admiral who had destroyed an empire was just a man grieving the family he could not save. Uncle. Taiho turned. Doyen stood behind him, 13 years old now, taller than before, his face harder and older than any child's face should be. The war had taken something from him that could never be returned. But he was alive. He had survived. "Come here," Taiho said softly. Doyen walked to the memorial and found his mother's name. Then his sister's. He stood very still, reading them over and over. "I dream about her sometimes," Doyen said. "Somi, in my dreams she is still laughing. Still asking me to build her paper ships." His voice cracked. "And then I wake up and remember."
Taiho
Put his arm around his nephew. "You will always remember. That is how we honor them. We carry them with us in our hearts forever." "Does it ever stop hurting?" Taiho considered lying. But Doyen deserved the truth. "No," he said. "It never stops. But you learn to live with it. You learn to keep moving forward. Because that is what they would want." Doyen nodded slowly. He reached out and touched his sister's name one last time. Then he stepped back, his jaw set with determination that looked too much like his mother's. "I want to join the military," Doyen said. "When I am old enough, I want to make sure this never happens again." Taiho looked at his nephew. He wanted to say no. He wanted to tell Doyen to live a peaceful life, to stay far away from war and death. But he knew he had no right. The war had made that choice for all of them. "When you are old enough," Taiho said, "I will train you myself." Across the galaxy, the other survivors of Myra 7 were finding their way. 47 children had lived through the attack. 47 orphans who had lost everything. Lieutenant Yunishin had made it her personal mission to ensure they found homes. She visited each one, She held their hands. She listened to their nightmares. She promised them that humanity would never forget what they had suffered. One girl, only 5 years old, asked Yuna why the bad aliens had hurt her family. Yuna did not have a good answer. There was no good answer for such questions. She simply held the child and said, "Sometimes bad things happen to good people. But we are here now. We will protect you. Always." Engineer Nari Choi destroyed her own research. She burned every file, every schematic, every blueprint for the weapons she had created. The extinction protocol had served its purpose. Now she prayed it would never be needed again. Her assistant found her sitting in her empty laboratory, staring at the walls. "Dr. Choi, are you all right?" Nari laughed bitterly. "I designed weapons that killed millions of beings. I created tools of absolute destruction. Am I all right?" She shook her head. "No, I will never be all right again. But I will live with what I did, because it was necessary. Do you regret it?" Nari thought for a long time. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that someone had to do it. But if I had not done it, someone else would have, and more humans would have died." She paused. "So no, I do not regret it. I only wish I could forget." Commander Wajin, unretired from the Ghost Division. He had seen too much, done too much. His hands would never be clean again. He bought a small house on a quiet moon far from Earth. He planted a garden. He raised vegetables. He tried to find peace in simple things, but the nightmares never stopped. Every night, he saw the faces of everyone he had killed. Valoran soldiers, Valoran civilians, men and women who might have been innocent, who might have disagreed with their government's actions, who might have been just as horrified by Meyer 7 as the humans were. He had killed them anyway. Because those were his orders. Because humanity demanded vengeance. Because someone had to do the dark work that allowed others to keep their hands clean. One day, he received a letter from a young Valoran. The letter said, "My father was a ship captain. He died in the Battle of the Border Stations. He never agreed with the attack on Myra 7. He was just following orders." Wujin read the letter many times. He did not know what to say. How do you apologize to someone whose parent you killed? How do you explain that war does not care about innocence or guilt? He wrote back, "I am sorry for your loss. Your father was probably a good man caught in terrible circumstances. So was I. So were we all. I hope someday you can find peace. I hope someday we all can." He never received a response. But he kept the letter forever. General Suji Park established what became known as the Myra Doctrine. It was simple and absolute. Any species that attacked human civilians would face total retaliation. No surrender would be accepted. No mercy would be shown. The punishment would continue until the aggressor species no longer existed as a threat.